Hello and welcome to the Connection Compass. I am your host, Andrea Louise Evans. To find out more about my work, please visit andrealevans.com. This week, I am chatting to Mick Timpson, architect, artist, coach, and yoga teacher. Mick is the author of 2 books, Making Happy Work, A Beginner's Guide to Navigating the World with Meditation, and A Modern Way to Meditate. Meditation-based strategies to switch you on and discover a whole new way of being and doing. This week, Mick and I talk about yoga and the concept of Maya, which is the cloud of appearance, and flow, and a whole load of other things. So sit comfortable and listen to our chat. Hello, Mick, and welcome to the Connection Compass. It's so lovely to be here. Obviously, I know you because we've met through yoga. You've been my yoga teacher, and I did my yoga teacher training with you as well. So I want to talk about all things yoga, plus lots and lots of other things to talk about today. One of the questions I want to ask you is, in this world that just feels so fragmented at times, why is yoga so important for us today in society?
Oh, that's a fantastic question, Andrew, and that's been taxing me. Well, since probably since November the 5th this year, when Trump was elected. But yeah, it's well, where do we start? Where do we start? Well, you use the word fragmented, which I think is absolutely spot on.
Yeah.
Because what does yoga mean at its root? It means joining together. It means union. So we have to have faith and hope that those of us who are on a yoga journey, whether you're teaching or writing or just practicing on your own, what you do is important. What you do is vital, even if it's just on your own or with a few friends, or or you're teaching lots and lots of people. What you do is important, and I think it's more important now than it ever has been, because we've really, really got to remember that the role of human beings, what I'm about to say here, Andrea, our default setting is joy. Our default
Yeah.
setting is joy. And I don't know about you, but I've seen the joy in the world being sucked out.
Absolutely. It felt like that. And if you observe closely, it feels as if there's anything good, it's kind of pulled apart, it's kind of chipped away at. I also feel about things that brought us together as as a community, as a world. So things like Brexit. So things like, doesn't matter about kind of what you thought about them, but the royal family, they brought people together all over the world, all chipped away, even kind of, England, Wales, and all that chipped away. We want to be independent. There's been this chipping away of things where we've been united. And I feel I've observed it, but I felt that as well in the world.
Yeah, yeah. You're not the only one. I think in my close family, for instance, my mother, she's 92 now.
Yeah.
She frequently looks up from the Radio Times and says to me, "Isn't the world a terrible place now?"
Yeah.
And you just sit there and look at her and think, "Yes, Mum, it is. It really, really is." And if if our older generation are picking up on this,
Mm.
our younger generation is certainly picking up on this. And I think, yeah, it's almost as if, well, I suppose, as a species, human beings we are actively designing our own demise.
Yeah.
We are,
Yeah.
we are so good at it. We no matter how often we go on about climate change, we're still discussing it. We're still talking about it. We're not actually doing anything, you know,
Yeah.
on a world scale to tackle it. I mean, look at the UK this week. Places have been waist deep in water.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, so it's yeah. We just we just seem to be, well, we're sort of switching ourselves off. And I don't want to sort of, well, I suppose you could get into the sort of woke debate, but it's been very amusing to watch in the States how at least half the country have voted to be asleep. They voted to say, no, no, we don't want to wake up. We don't want to deal with the world and the crisis that we're facing. We're just going to go to McDonald's. We're just going to watch the wrestling, watch the football, vote for this guy who's basically an idiot, but it doesn't matter. He's our idiot. And they're very happy to just go with it. Just go with
Yeah.
it. The flip side of all that is very interesting, though, in that it does point to the fact that people are looking for change.
Yes. Yeah, very much. So I suppose we have this we're not being pessimistic, we're being realistic, aren't we, about what we kind of see and what we feel from kind of looking inwards really and noticing how we're feeling and reacting. But we don't believe that's the end, that there is some hope, that people do want change, and people are kind of realizing that we're not going down in the right direction and we do need to change.
Yes, I think so, and I think the biggest problem we have is the internet, because the internet is the most wonderful thing. If you think about it, what a wonderful thing to do.
Yeah.
But we seem to be completely inept at it.
Yes.
It's, we're not ready for it yet. We
No.
and social media is at huge fault here. And those algorithms that follow your
Mm.
amygdala and keep you in fight flight mode and keep you hooked on your adrenaline and your dopamine fixes. And it really is. It's very desperate.
it,
So,
it's it's had some amazing benefits in terms of the way how we, I suppose Emma and I were talking about it the other week about, the connection that we have and creating these connections across the world that we may not have. But there's also been the consequence of that tunnel vision, only being able to see kind of one point of view, not seeing the bigger picture, not connecting dots together. I kind of feel that very much. And one of the things that I've really worried, and I don't know how long it's been there for, it's only kind of in the recent months that I've noticed. But if you've Googled anything recently, that the AI explanation is pinned to the top.
yeah,
And it's if you're looking at, and sometimes I've looked at it and I thought, oh right, okay, fair enough. Yeah, I can kind of see that. But then sometimes I've looked at things and thought, no, I don't think that's quite right. But in this fast-paced and modern day world, having an AI version pinned at the top, is that going to encourage people to look deeper? Or are they just going to look at that AI version and go, oh, right, okay, yeah,
yeah,
that's fine. In which case, people are going to start thinking the same, which is,
yeah, yeah. That's very, very true. Yes, I think everyone's imagination gets funneled down these narrow straits, and you're not encouraged to explore further.
yes.
Not encouraged to move from one idea to the next, to the next, to the next. There's just black and white, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's problematic for me, particularly for our humanness, our human beings, because then things are being looked at from a surface level perspective, but we are so much more.
Yeah,
We're so much deeper. We're complex. We're messy. So that that is problematic for me. And I would love to see a world where we think more deeper and we connect on a deeper level
yeah,
instead of this surface level position that we have really.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that surface level for stuff is very interesting. If you remember from your yoga teaching, we called this Maya, this whole thing about
Yeah.
illusion and the world inside your head. And yeah, I- I'm not an expert in this by any stretch of the imagination, but I think if you were a yoga scholar, now is the time to really investigate what Maya is all about. Now is the time to investigate what Maya is all about, because we're living in an age now of complete fabrication. Nothing is real anymore.
Mm.
Nothing is real.
So that was one of the things I was going to ask you about next is about Maya, because you have wrote a couple of articles on LinkedIn about Maya. So can we talk a little bit more about that and explain what it is and the relevance it has for today?
Yes. Well, it is. Yeah, it is absolutely fascinating. And I suppose it's only really sort of hit me over the last year or so. I've always been fascinated by this concept of Maya, which is basically, it roughly translates as cloud of appearance. Some people actually translate it directly as the word magic, which I think is really, really interesting. But Maya, cloud of appearance. And I suppose if you were to look at things like Instagram and Facebook and whatever, they are Maya. They are
Yeah.
Maya made real, because it's all cloud of appearance. None of it is factual. None of it is real. It's all based on a whole set of illusions
Mm.
of magic, if you like. And I think the key manufacturer of Maya is ego. So
Yes.
ego that promotes and fuels the cloud of appearance. If you sort of put those two things together, it is fascinating to see how most of us live in a world of Maya where we are not really in touch with reality at all.
Mm.
We are living in a world made up completely inside one's head. And what is fascinating is then who's putting that stuff in people's heads?
Yes.
If you remember, thoughts are not real. Thoughts think themselves.
Yeah.
Thoughts manufacture themselves, but at some point, something or someone is creating the conditions for certain thoughts to arise, uh,
Yes.
which then people believe as facts or true. So they're living in this mental narrative, which is basically Maya. So you're living in this mental world, which is completely fabricated. And of course, then that's where the problems start, because the more you embed yourself in Maya, which is very easy to do, the more you embed yourself in that, the more the world doesn't correspond with what's in your head. So
Yes.
that's when we start to then witness things like anxiety and stress and depression, because Maya and ego deliberately misrepresent what's actually happening.
Yes.
You know, you just go around the world assuming and thinking certain people will do certain things. The world will operate in the way you want it to, and the way that's going to serve you personally. And when that doesn't happen, that's when the friction starts. That's
Yeah.
when the
Mm.
resistance starts. That's when you start to get angry. And of course, then that fuels all sorts of issues, depression, anxiety, stress. And so Maya is basically the source of that. But the interesting thing, I mean, it's not all bad. It's not all bad, because the yogi's job, in fact, it's all of our jobs really, but the yogi's job through yoga and meditation is to see Maya, is to
Mm.
see it. And when you see it, you're free. You're free.
Yes.
And that is basically what I've been teaching over the last 30 years or so, is to get people into that space where they are liberated and feel that they can be themselves.
Yes.
And that the world of Maya can be seen and experienced, but you're not overwhelmed by it. You know how to respond to it. It's that lovely old yogic phrase, be in the world and not of it. Being field independent, as they say, sort of being in the world, doing your thing, but knowing that everything around you isn't real, and you can begin to spot. And if you want to know how Maya operates, uh,
Yes.
just watch the TV. Watch adverts, watch TV adverts. TV adverts, designers who make adverts are experts at Maya. They're
Mm.
experts because they create this illusionary world, and it's done in such a way as to then promote you or push you into it, to push you into it, particularly this time of year. You know, look at all the Christmas adverts
Yes.
where you have families all coming together, having a great time, dining room tables filled with the most amazing festive food and treats, and and it's snowing outside and everyone's having a great time. That's Maya. That's
Yeah.
because it's not real. It's not
No.
real. And yet it's put into your heads. This is what Christmas should be like. And if
Yeah.
you do this, you're doing something wrong, you know? And that then causes stress. So I it really makes me feel very depressed
Yeah.
by it.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that in terms of the Christmas adverts as well. And when I see them, I mean, I suppose I see the illusion and I think, well, that's not Christmas for me.
Mm,
Christmas isn't about this. It's something more internal. It's something deeper, and so I don't really go along with it. But people do, and people can do because they think that's what it should be like. But it can be something else. It can be something more meaningful and something more deeper. Can So when I was reading the articles on Maya that you'd wrote, and obviously looking for change for the future, and I was thinking, well, the antidote. I feel the antidote to this is to turn inwards,
yeah,
and to notice yourself and how you feel. And rather than I found it easier to go inwards and work things out inwards and I think, say, when I see an advert, well, what does this mean? To me, everybody's something that happens and it causes a furore. We've had lots of things over the years that have caused massive this overtly furore, this anger. And I felt, think some really horrible things have happened, but I haven't gone external with it. I've gone inwards. And it's from going inwards that I've been able to work things out. So I suppose work beyond the Maya. Is that the same for you? Do you think
yeah. Yes, I think that's absolutely spot on. That I think, Andrew, you've got to operate in the world from a deeper place,
yeah,
really. And I think that that's what Maya is inviting us to do. It's sort of saying, this is illusion. It's not real. It's ephemeral. It's surface. Reality is something deeper,
yeah,
and it's an invitation to go in, as you said. And you can have, you've got a choice here, haven't you? You can either go with Maya and go with the illusion and be very happy with it, and live inside that world, and go with all the goods and the good and the bad of it all. Or you can decide to go inwards and just simply watch and observe Maya, still take part in the world, but take part from that deeper place, from that
yeah,
sense of being. And as when I'm teaching this stuff in universities or in business, you say, this, imagine being able to work in your context and your environment from a deeper place, you know,
yes,
from a place where you're calm, you're creative, you're insightful, you're spontaneous, you're joyful. Imagine working from that world and then projecting all of that stuff out into the outside world. That's where you want to be. That's where you want to be. And everybody benefits
yes.
when you get that right. So
And
it's a question of going in, but it's also a question of, okay, I'm in here. Now what do I do? You have to then go back into the world. And this podcast is a great example. Go back into the world and do your thing.
yes, that's right. And for me, it's kind of the going inwards is. overcoming the, I'm going to say going inwards. I mean, kind of a come to the breath, or I'll do some meditation, or I'll do some journaling, or I'll really kind of think about my thoughts and where they're coming from and why they're coming from. But I also think it helps to overcome that polarization. So if you observe, you can see it. You can see it on kind of social media. So, for example, like on X, and I shouldn't really do it, but I get really geeky about it, and I like I like watching things being played out. But say, like on the Monday, you will get all one side of the argument, and then on the
Right.
Tuesday, you will get
Yeah.
all the other side of the argument. And you kind of say, and they're both kind of jarring. Nobody's kind of seeing the middle bit, and it's kind of, if you go in, you'll see this third bit. There's a third part to this, if you know what, isn't there? Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. No, that's very amusing. That I mean, you're younger than me, Andrea, so I wouldn't know what to do on X at all. But no, you're dead right. Yeah, this is the problem with the internet, isn't it? It doesn't do subtlety. You know,
Yes.
it doesn't do irony, and it's either over here or over there. It can't be in the middle. It can't be balanced. It can't be, embracing everything. It's either this or that, and that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, what we're talking about now is what you refer to as the inner architect,
Mhm.
which is part of your work. So you've been an architect, you're a yoga teacher, and you have the inner architect as well. So would you be able to share a little bit about your journey from architect to yoga teacher to the inner architect? I would love
Yes.
people to
Yeah.
hear that. That would be wonderful.
Yes, no, that would be yes. Well, it's a long and complex story, but the interesting enough, it's funny because at the weekend I was at the Barbican in London, uh,
Mhm.
visiting one of my old architecture students,
All
who's now in her 50s. I can't believe it. I taught her when she was 18. You know,
right.
it's just ridiculous. But I was visiting her. She's got a flat in the Barbican, and I gave her one of my books and wrote in the front, "This is all your fault," because it was her that took me to my first yoga class.
Right. Oh,
I was
brilliant.
Yeah, I was teaching her architecture, and then one day she said, "Mick, would you be interested? I'm going to a yoga class this evening," and I said, "Oh, I've always been interested in it. Yeah, I'll come along with you." And strange as you do, and I was hooked. From that very very first yoga class. That was way back in, oh goodness, when was that? 1989, 1990, something like that. Yeah, yes, about 1990. So, and yeah, we're very interesting. It's an interesting journey because, I mean, I got into yoga for probably a lot the same reasons a lot of people in their late 20s, early 30s got into it.
Mhm.
Living and working in London. When we came out of uni, I came out with a first class honors and then a distinction in my masters. We went straight to London, and the pressure was on because we were part of that generation, and there was a lot of expectation on me to be really thrive and to have a very interesting career, which was good, and I did. But very early on, I started to take on too much,
Mhm.
and I put myself under so much mental and creative pressure. Really, really did. And if I have to say, I didn't really enjoy living in London either,
Mhm.
which was a bit overwhelming. But yes, so I started to suffer with panic attacks. I started to get very anxious. I had this general anxiety disorder where, basically you felt terrible every day. Uh,
Yeah. Mhm.
Particularly Sunday nights, Monday mornings, the Sunday night blues. I used to get that terrible. I used to be dizzy spells, all sorts of things.
Mm.
And I just couldn't, I thought this is just, I've got to do something about this. And so I went to this yoga class, and literally within, I would say, a couple of months, we had a very strict yoga teacher, very strict. But in a couple of months, I began to just get what he was saying, that you could see your thinking. that you could
Mhm.
be separate from your thinking. And most of us are taught to believe that what we think is real and that what we think is us, when in fact you can be separate from that and observe it. And I literally realized I had a choice at that point. I really just began to realize, yeah, I don't have to be like I used to be. And that was a very interesting moment in my career as an architect, because I started to then, and this is an interesting point, I started to then realize that what I was doing in the office as a young architect, when I was working in designing and drawing and making stuff, it was the same feeling I was getting on the yoga mat, that same feeling. And I began to think, this is very interesting, all of this stuff. And I mean, I have to say, I've been very lucky as an architect, because I was always the creative guy in the office. So I was always given large sheets of paper and felt tip pens and said, right, go, Mick, off you go. Go this stuff, and then come back in a couple of days and show us what you've got. And that was my entire career. And I was so lucky to be able to do that. But I began to realize, as I was drawing and designing, the sort of feelings and that sense of focus that was beginning to develop in my professional work was also, I was feeling it in my yoga journey as well. And it wasn't until I read I read about different architects, some quite famous architects. A lot of them talked about this feeling of being able to just be at one with the paper, being at
Mhm.
one with the pen, being at one with what you're doing. And I thought, this is just completely bonkers, because we talk about this stuff in yoga.
Mhm.
And then that magical word entered my world, flow.
Yes.
To be able to get into that flow space and then realize then that that flow space, that going inwards, but operating in the world outside at the same time, being clear in your thinking, being joyful, feeling that every action has a purpose, and it connects to the next action. Suddenly, I was reading about this stuff from other architects, never mentioned yoga, but they talked a lot about this flow stuff. And then I realized then that yoga was the root in for
Mhm.
this feeling of oneness, of unity with what you're doing. And when I read an interpretation of yoga as the art of skillful living, I thought
Mhm.
it's really lovely. That's what it's about. So suddenly there was this big crashing together of my architecture and my design work and my creative work and yoga. And they began to really, really meld together. And
Mhm.
that was a way open for me. We taught, as you know, Andrew, we taught conventional yoga classes, but, I went and became a yoga teacher. The, the issue was that I was very keen to create yoga that was what we used to say, real yoga for real people who live real lives, making it completely relevant to everyone who came to the class, so they could use it in their world and make the discoveries that I made in
Mhm.
us working day in, day out world. So there's all of that stuff. But so that got me into, I taught at university for a while. I practiced. We had a business, Sue and I, my wife, she's an architect. We had a business together in London, then in Manchester. The office is still going in Manchester, as you know, but we're not really involved in it so much these days. We've sort of given over to the own.
Yeah.
But suddenly, suddenly this idea that that it takes us all the way back to Maya, doesn't it? We
Yeah.
create the world, we create the world we live in. We simultaneously create and inhabit the world we're living in. So if that's the case, and that's the case, then why not use yoga to help people create a different world, to
Yes.
create a better, deeper, more colorful, more real world for them to inhabit? And that was where the term inner architect came from, because suddenly I had gone from, creating buildings and places for people to live in, to then asking others and teaching others and training others to create their own world from the inside out, and to see the world differently with more clarity. And that's what yoga does. And that's where the term inner architect came from.
That's incredible. I want to ask a couple of questions from something that you said. So, one of them was, and it's something that I've recognized as well, about that approaching your late 20s and your early 30s, and something happens to not everybody, but where there's just so much pressure. It's like there's internal pressure, there's external pressure, and it kind of squeezes you and it pushes you into another direction. What do you think happens there? What do you think is happening? Or
I suppose there's peer pressure, isn't there? There's expectation, particularly if you go, particularly if you go into higher or further education, you're spat out at the other end, and you're told to do this thing in this way, and you think, yeah, I can do that, and it's sort of that I think happens, and you either go with it and think, yeah, this is what I've always wanted to do. I've always wanted to work in an office. I've always wanted to do this or that. Or there's something inside you that resists a little, and it's taken me like 40 years to learn to listen to that resistance.
yeah.
To learn to say, no, this isn't what I want. And it meant that I upset quite a few people in my architectural career, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't play ball. I've been partners and directors of certain firms, director of my own firm, but always found it, some people reveled in being on the board and, working for their commissions and their bonuses and their fee. And I sort of thought, I can't get my head around this stuff at all. I was terrible at it, really, to be honest. I was terrible at being a business person. So, yes, there was, you've got to learn that resistance. But I think that's why so many young people are suffering more now than ever, because of expectation,
Yeah.
And I think our education system too isn't doing right for young people. We're asking them to take exam after exam after exam. We're asking them to fit into a little box and be
Mm.
labeled and be a good, taxpayer. And I think that, that's such a shame,
Mm.
because we should be basically allowing young people to, because the world's there. The world is so full of opportunities.
Yeah.
Allow them to grow into what it is they want to do. But it means, that, Andrew, means changing everything, doesn't it? It means changing the economy. It means changing
Yeah.
and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So
Yeah.
I think expectation is the problem. And I think with our kids, my daughter's early 30s, my son is coming up for 30. And I suppose I've always said to them, both Sue and I have always said to them, do what you can, but make sure that you give yourself a choice. Make sure you get yourself into a world where there's a choice,
Mm.
not sucked in and then become part of the machinery, so to speak. Give yourself a choice. Do I want to do that, or can I do this? Always have a choice.
That's really, really good advice, because I think when you're caught up in the conveyor belt, if you like, if school, college, university, all those kind of things, you can lose sight of that voice that's inside that's saying, there's more.
Yeah.
That there's more here. And that's something that happened to me. I got to my late 20s, early 30s, and I was just lost. and everyone around me seemed to be quite happy, and life was like falling into place, and but I just had this inner feeling that there's more. And I had the anxiety and the panic attacks, and then I found yoga too. And for me, I've always said, all the theory and the ancient text of yoga, and I recognize, I understand it, but it was always about coming to the breath and having that connection and being able to really listen to that inner voice of saying, and but it takes courage to listen to it, because you you're kind of on your own. You're kind of on your to some extent, you're on your own with that.
Yeah, that is spot on, Andrew. You're on your own. You're on your own,
Yeah,
and yeah, it's yeah. I suppose the best way of describing it is you go inwards
yeah,
with the breath, with meditation, with posture, whatever it is you use, a combination of all of those things. You go inwards into that space, and then you sit and await further instructions. And,
yes,
and that's it. And you're pretty much on your own at that point. It's okay, right? What's next? And you just sit and wait. You sit
yeah.
and wait. And it's having the courage and
Mm.
and the faith and the self-awareness to just, yeah, sit and wait. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
I want to just ask you a few other things, if that's okay. So, I suppose now we're on work. You wrote a book, and your work has taken you into universities, into organizations, and you've worked kind of doing meditation. I want to ask you about, I think this year more than ever, I have had conversations and met people that are very similar to me, that have had a career for decades, and then they've stepped away. And it's not because we're ungrateful, but it's because our places of work don't always fit with our skill set anymore, and I just wonder, I suppose because I've had those conversations more, is there something about businesses and organizations that need to do things differently? I think I would be in exactly the same place if I'd been in an environment where all my skill set was being accounted for. But what I was finding was that I was going into the workplace, and I was doing a job, and I was only using about a quarter of my skill set. And that's okay for the short term, but it's not okay for the long term. It's crippling, in the long term. And I just wondered, is there something about, what's your opinion about, the work that you've done and the businesses that you've worked with? Do we have to do something different? Is there a call to workplaces to be different?
That's excellent. And I think yes is the answer to that. I think it's a very tricky thing because my experience is been basically higher education and studios, and it's a pretty rarefied environment that I've been in over the years. But yeah, I would say even in those environments there is a call to try and do things differently. I suppose the key thing, I mean, I sort of, I don't know if you know, but I'm once a year, I'm at the Manchester School of Art, and we
Yep.
we do this. In fact, you've done it, haven't you, with me? Our happy, spontaneous me thing.
Yes, it's amazing.
Yeah. And I've sort of adapted that whole process now for higher education. And it's just brilliant. I mean, we do a combination of guided drawn exercises with meditation, and we link the two together. As what I was saying earlier, trying to link action, being and doing together. And yeah, and that's really interesting. And there's no doubt in my mind that the response we get from that, from the tutors and from the students, is just excellent. And that really has, the tutors report back to me that it makes such an impact on their day-to-day experience, particularly with the students, because I'm often in third year, which is an important year for designers. So they're coming up for their graduation, for their final results, and being able to get them to relax, to focus, to be present, and to tap into their creativity is fundamental, really, to success. And I think really that's where business needs to go. And a lot of businesses talk about it. We need to create environments where people's creativity is nurtured, encouraged, and then used. And that could be anything. Creativity doesn't mean being able to paint a painting or design a
Sure.
building.
Mhm.
Creativity is everything. Whether it's, whatever it is you're doing, every action we do is a creative action if it's done from the right
Mhm.
place. That's what we were saying earlier about, working from the inside out. And when you get that, every action then is a creative action. And with that then comes this joy, this sense of well-being, this sense of
Yes.
fulfillment. And that's where I think business needs to go. They need to be really understanding creativity as a force,
Mm.
as something that they could nurture and then basically, use. I mean, I used to often say in the businesses I've worked in, they've all been obviously design businesses, but I often used to say, what is it we're actually selling for? What are we and everyone sits around and not really be sure what it is we were selling. And I was saying, well, it's obvious, isn't it? We're selling people's ability to be creative. We are,
Mhm.
that room out there full of young, creative people. We're selling that. We're selling that as the main
Mhm.
product we produce. This amazing ability to allow people to be creative and then focused and then directed. And so that was the bottom line for me in almost everything we did. So when I was running my office in Manchester, in the Northern Quarter, it was, that's what we did. We did. I spent a huge amount of time just encouraging young people to take risks, to feel as if their input mattered, to get them into a space where they could tap in to what is important for them.
And that's a great example of looking beyond the surface, isn't it? About around what you're selling, people think it's a product, but actually there's something deeper. There's something deeper and there's something more meaningful behind it, isn't there? Um, can we just talk again just a little bit about going inwards? Because within the workplace, you do teach meditation. So just about modern day meditation and the 4 A's. That's
Yes, yeah. Well, this was a way, and this ties in. This is what I'm doing a lot now these days. I, the two books I've written, Making Happy Work and then A Modern Way to Meditate. Making Happy Work was nice. I'm very much based on yoga and what we do in our classes, etc. And then I began to, I've been thinking about this for a long, long time. How do we use and teach and train meditation and practice meditation in a way that is clear and sensible and easy to apply to day-to-day work? And so a modern way to meditate came out of that, and it's based around sort of 4 A's, attitude, awareness. Sorry, I should start again. Attention, awareness, attitude, and action. And it's the 4 A's, and we have a little tracker that goes with it. And it works like a dream. It works like a dream because we when we do it with workshops, we set little exercises, little flow exercises, and they get progressively more and more challenging, and they involve more and more people, so that you work from starting as an individual, then you start to build up into groups. But at specific times, we then stop, we meditate, and then we track how we were doing on our 4 A's. And you
Mhm.
this little graphic spider diagram that you use. And it is just brilliant because You then get students particular who are sitting there, you give them all these exercises to do, and you train them in the 4As and you train them to meditate. And then they sit and analyze that last 10 minutes when they were working. So for instance, where was your attention? Well, my attention was pretty much, I kept getting distracted. I kept thinking about stuff. Where is your awareness? Well, I tried really hard to be centered in your saying. What was your attitude? Well, my attitude was, oh, I hope I'm going to really be good at this, and expectation. And then action. Did you get into that flow space? Did you feel as if it was all happening by itself, as a sort of pocket version of what we do, but it works like a dream. And the students really sort of then get to see firsthand where they're doing well and where they can improve their mindsets, where they can improve their attention skills and where they can deepen their access to creative flow. And it really, really does work extremely well. And I think also then, when we teach this in business as well, it is very nice because, I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. I do say, this comes from a thing called yoga. It's 5,000 years old and it's tried and tested. We know this stuff works, but this is how we make it modern and relative to you now in your context. And so, on the one hand, you're talking about yogic principles and philosophies, which, doesn't scare too many horses. On the other hand, then you start talking about well-being and the nature of attention and awareness and all those other things. And then we start talking about creativity and then how creativity is the source of well-being, joy, and, and purpose and all those things. And they all roll in together. And in business, in fact, I did one last week for a big company of project managers. And yeah, it works. It really, really works. Even if these people just learn to relax, they just learn to relax. That's the key. If they go further and beyond, then brilliant. But if you just teach them those basic skills of being centered, being present, relaxed, focused, then you've done something important, because it's a skill that will stay with them forever.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I've really enjoyed talking to you today, Mick. I really, really have. We've covered so much, haven't we?
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming on. Just something final for anybody out there who's thinking about meditation. What advice would you give them?
Well, do it. Yeah, I think find yourself a good class. Find yourself a good class, and explore. Even though I've written 2 books on meditation, try to find a teacher. Try to find a good teacher. There are a lot of good teachers out there, but there are an awful lot of bad teachers, as we know, Andrea.
Yeah. So
try and find one that feels authentic to you, that you have an engagement with. I necessarily wouldn't go to a mindfulness class. I would go to a proper yogic meditation class because I think that'll be more useful. And and just do it. Just do it and see where it takes you. I mean, just let go, and know that learning meditation, learning yoga is the best thing you can do for yourself and everybody else.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome, Andrew. It's been a gas. Brilliant. Well done.
What a great conversation that was with Mick. I really, really enjoyed it. If you want to learn more about Mick's work, you can find courses and information on meditation and events at beando.co.uk. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Connection Compass. If you think it will help someone, please leave a review at podchaser.com. If you have any questions, please visit Andrea L. Evans' Facebook page. And remember to keep talking, keep connecting for a more interconnected world. Take care.